Americans are citizens of the United States of America. The country is home to people of many different national origins. As a result, many Americans do not equate the nationality with ethnicity, but with citizenship, allegiance and culture. Although citizens make up the majority of Americans, non-citizen residents, dual citizens, and expatriates may also claim an American identity. The use in English of the term American to exclusively mean people of the United States developed from its original use to differentiate English people of the American colonies from English people of England, despite its linguistic ambiguity in other senses of the word American, which can also refer to people from the Americas in general. See names for United States citizens. Overview. The majority of Americans or their ancestors immigrated to America or were brought as slaves within the past 5 centuries, with the exception of the Native American population and people from Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippine Islands who became American through expansion of the country in the 19th century, and American Samoa, the U.S. Virgin Islands and Northern Mariana Islands in the 20th century. Despite its multi-ethnic composition, the culture of the United States held in common by most Americans can also be referred to as mainstream American culture, a Western culture largely derived from the traditions of Northern and Western European colonists, settlers, and immigrants. It also includes influences of African American culture. Westward expansion integrated the Creoles and Cajuns of Louisiana and the Hispanos of the Southwest and brought close contact with the culture of Mexico. Large-scale immigration in the late 19th and early 20th centuries from Southern and Eastern Europe introduced a variety of elements. Immigration from Asia, Africa, and Latin America has also had impact. A cultural melting pot, or pluralistic salad bowl, describes the way in which generations of Americans have celebrated and exchanged distinctive cultural characteristics. In addition to the United States, Americans and people of American descent can be found internationally. As many as 7 million Americans are estimated to be living abroad, and make up the American diaspora. Racial and ethnic groups. The United States of America is a diverse country, racially and ethnically. 6 races are officially recognized by the U.S. Census Bureau for statistical purposes: white, American Indian and Alaska Native, Asian, Black or African American, Native Hawaiian and other Pacific Islander, and people of 2 or more races. Some other race is also an option in the census and other surveys. The United States Census Bureau also classifies Americans as Hispanic Latino and not Hispanic Latino, which identifies Hispanic and Latino Americans as a racially diverse ethnicity that comprises the largest minority group in the nation. White and European Americans, people of European descent, or white Americans, constitute the majority of the 308 million people living in the United States, with 72.4% of the population in the 2010 United States Census. They are considered people who trace their ancestry to the original peoples of Europe, the Middle East, and North Africa. Of those reporting to be white American, 7,487,133 reported to be multiracial, with largest combination being white and black. Additionally, there are 29,184,290 white Hispanics or Latinos. Non-Hispanic whites are the majority in 46 states. There are 4 minority-majority states: California, Texas, New Mexico, and Hawaii. In addition, the District of Columbia has a non-white majority. The state with the highest percentage of non-Hispanic white Americans is Maine. The largest continental ancestral group of Americans is that of Europeans who have origins in any of the original peoples of Europe. This includes people via African, North American, Caribbean, Central American, South American and Oceanian nations that have a large European diaspora. The Spanish were the first Europeans to establish a continuous presence in what is now the United States. Martin de Arguelles, born 1566, San Agustin, La Florida, was the first person of European descent born in what is now the United States. 21 years later, Virginia Dare, born 1587, Roanoke Island in present-day North Carolina, was the first child born in the 13 colonies to English parents. In the 2014 American Community Survey, German Americans, Irish Americans, English Americans and Italian Americans were the four largest self-reported European ancestry groups in the United States, forming 37.8% of the total population. However, the English Americans and British Americans demography is considered a serious undercount, as the stock tend to self-report and identify as simply Americans due to the length of time they have inhabited America. Overall, as the largest group, European Americans have the lowest poverty rate and the second highest educational attainment levels, median household income, and median personal income of any racial demographic in the nation. Hispanic and Latino Americans. Hispanic and Latino Americans constitute the largest ethnic minority in the United States. They form the second largest group after non-Hispanic whites in the United States, comprising 16.3% of the population according to the 2010 United States Census. Hispanic, Latino Americans are very racially diverse, and as a result form an ethnic category rather than a race. People of Spanish or Hispanic descent have lived in what is now the United States since the founding of St. Augustine, Florida in 1565 by Pedro Menendez de Avalos. In the state of Texas, Spaniards first settled the region in the late 1600s and formed a unique cultural group known as Tejanos. Black and African Americans. Black and African Americans are citizens and residents of the United States with origins in sub-Saharan Africa. According to the Office of Management and Budget, the grouping includes individuals who self-identify as African American, as well as persons who emigrated from nations in the Caribbean and sub-Saharan Africa. The grouping is thus based on geography, and may contradict or misrepresent an individual's self-identification, since not all immigrants from sub-Saharan Africa are black. Among these racial outliers are persons from Cape Verde, Madagascar, various Arab states and Hamito-Semitic populations in East Africa and the Sahel, and the Afrikaners of Southern Africa. African Americans are citizens or residents of the United States who have origins in any of the black populations of Africa. According to the 2009 American Community Survey, there were 38,093,725 black and African Americans in the United States, representing 12.4% of the population. In addition, there were 37,144,530 non-Hispanic blacks, which comprised 12.1% of the population. This number increased to 42 million according to the 2010 United States Census, when including multiracial African Americans, making up 14% of the total U.S. population. Black and African Americans make up the second largest group in the United States, but the third largest group after white Americans and Hispanic or Latino Americans. The majority of the population lives in the South, compared to the 2000 census. There has also been a decrease of African Americans in the Northeast and Midwest. Most African Americans are the direct descendants of captives from West Africa, who survived the slavery era within the boundaries of the present United States. As an adjective, the term is usually spelled African American. The first West African slaves were brought to Jamestown, Virginia in 1619. The English settlers treated these captives as indentured servants and released them after a number of years. This practice was gradually replaced by the system of race-based slavery used in the Caribbean. All the American colonies had slavery, but it was usually the form of personal servants in the North, and field hands in plantations in the South. By the beginning of the American Revolutionary War, 1/5 of the total population was enslaved. During the Revolution, some would serve in the Continental Army, a Continental Navy, while others would serve the British Empire in Lord Dunmore's Ethiopian Regiment, and other units. By 1804, the northern states had abolished slavery. However, slavery would persist in the southern states until the end of the American Civil War and the passage of the 13th Amendment. Following the end of the Reconstruction era, which saw the first African American representation in Congress, African Americans became disenfranchised and subject to Jim Crow laws, legislation that would persist until the passage of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and Voting Rights Act due to the Civil Rights Movement. According to U.S. Census Bureau data, very few African immigrants self-identify as African American. On average, less than 5% of African residents self-reported as African American or Afro-American on the 2000 U.S. Census. The overwhelming majority of African immigrants identified instead with their own respective ethnicities. Self-designation as African American or Afro-American was highest among individuals from West Africa, and lowest among individuals from Cape Verde, East Africa and Southern Africa. African immigrants may also experience conflict with African Americans. Asian Americans. Another significant population is the Asian American population, comprising 17.3 million in 2010, or 5.6% of the U.S. population. California is home to 5.6 million Asian Americans, the greatest number in any state. In Hawaii, Asian Americans make up the highest proportion of the population. Asian Americans live across the country, yet are heavily urbanized, with significant populations in the greater Los Angeles area, New York metropolitan area, and the San Francisco Bay Area. They are by no means a monolithic group. The largest subgroups are immigrants or descendants of immigrants from Cambodia, mainland China, India, Japan, Korea, Laos, Pakistan, the Philippines, Taiwan, Thailand, and Vietnam. Asians overall have higher income levels than all other racial groups in the United States, including whites, and the trend appears to be increasing in relation to those groups. Additionally, Asians have a higher education attainment level than all other racial groups in the United States. For better or worse, the group has been called a model minority. While Asian Americans have been in what is now the United States since before the Revolutionary War, relatively large waves of Chinese, Filipino, and Japanese immigration did not begin until the mid to late 19th century. Immigration and significant population growth continue to this day. Due to a number of factors, Asian Americans have been stereotyped as perpetual foreigners, Middle Easterners and North Africans. See also Luis de Torres, Estefanico, and Joaquim Gans. According to the American Jewish Archives and the Arab American National Museum, some of the first Middle Easterners and North Africans arrived in the Americas between the late 15th and mid-16th centuries. Many were fleeing ethnic or ethno-religious persecution during the Spanish Inquisition, and a few were also taken to the Americas as slaves. According to the Arab American Institute, countries of origin for Arab Americans include Algeria, Bahrain, Comoros, Djibouti, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Kuwait, Lebanon, Libya, Mauritania, Morocco, Oman, Qatar, Palestine, Saudi Arabia, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, Tunisia, United Arab Emirates and Yemen. In 1909, the Superior Court and the Department of Justice in Washington, D.C. ruled on a case that redefined Middle Easterness and the racial distinction. According to the Arab American Historical Foundation and the Los Angeles Herald, a case in which George Shisham, a Lebanese policeman, arrested a white man who claimed that because Shisham was Lebanese, he must not be racially white but rather Chinese-Mongolian. Shisham, his attorneys, and the Syrian, Lebanese and Arab American communities rallied to prove that Lebanese, Syrians, and all Arabs and Middle Easterners were in fact white to both gain official citizenship in the United States, as well as avoid other exclusive and restrictive penalties of being labeled as Asian. One of Shisham's arguments appealed to the white justice's desire to connect to the revered religious figure, Jesus. Shisham said, "If I'm a Mongolian, then so is Jesus, because we came from the same land." As noted in the 1909 publication of the Proceedings of the Asiatic Exclusion League, the presiding Judge Hutton concluded that Syrians had descended from Hebrews, who descended from the Semitic family of the Indo-Aryan race. But because the Mongol conquerors had killed the Syrian men, and interbred with the Syrian women, Western nations have been unable to restore original characteristics. Shisham won and was granted citizenship, and Middle Easterners were thereafter legally considered white in the United States. However, in 1910, Congress passed a bill that defined Armenians, Assyrians, and Jews as Asiatics, while still approving the claims to citizenship. This declaration, while not taking away the citizenship, affirmed the ethnic origins and identities of Armenians, Assyrians, and Jews as non-white. Over the decades of the 20th century, as more Arab Americans, Jewish Americans and other ethnic groups settled in the United States, the racial discrimination they faced also increased. Due to the ruling in Shisham's case and the interpretation of the Equal Protection Clause of the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution, United States citizens could not sue one another for discrimination if they belonged to the same race. However, in 1987, after an Iraqi-American associate professor was refused tenure due to his Arab origins and a synagogue was spray-painted with anti-Semitic insignia, the Supreme Court ruled unanimously today that Arabs, Jews and members of other ethnic groups may sue under a post-Civil War law's broad prohibition against discrimination. Parallel with this ruling, many members of these groups, from Jews to North Africans to Arab Americans, did not consider themselves white. Additionally, as modern scientific data improved, more information on the true origins and ethnic distinctions emerged. For example, studies have shown that Jews share more genetic relativity to other Jews around the world than to the surrounding non-Jewish ethnic groups. Some studies have also suggested that other Middle Eastern ethnic groups remain one of the closest relations to Jews. The United States Census Bureau is presently finalizing the ethnic classification of MENA populations. In 2012, prompted in part by post-9/11 discrimination, the American Arab Anti-Discrimination Committee petitioned the Department of Commerce's Minority Business Development Agency to designate the MENA populations as a minority, disadvantaged community. Following consultations with MENA organizations, the Census Bureau announced in 2014 that it would establish a new MENA ethnic category for populations from the Middle East, North Africa and the Arab world, separate from the white classification that these populations had previously sought in 1909. The expert groups, including some Jewish organizations, felt that the earlier white designation no longer accurately represents Mena identity, so they successfully lobbied for a distinct categorization. This process does not currently include ethno-religious groups such as Jews or Sikhs, as the Bureau only tabulates these groups as followers of religions rather than members of ethnic groups. As of December 2015, the sampling strata for the new MENA category includes the Census Bureau's working classification of 19 MENA groups, as well as Turkish, Sudanese, Djiboutian, Somali, Mauritanian, Armenian, Cypriot, Afghan, Azerbaijani and Georgian groups. Although tabulated, religious responses were reported as a single total and not differentiated, despite totaling 1,089,597 in 2000. Independent organizations provide improved estimates of the total populations of races and ethnicities in the U.S. using the raw data from the U.S. Census and other surveys. For example, although any respondents who self-identified as Jewish were included under the religious responses in the census, as Jews are an ethno-religious group with culture and ethnicity intertwined, estimates from the Mandel L. Berman Institute and the North American Jewish Data Bank put the total population of Jews between 5.34 and 6.16 million in 2000 and around 6.54 million in 2010. Similarly, the Arab American Institute estimated the population of Arab Americans at 3.7 million in 2012. The majority of Arab Americans are Christian. Most Maronites tend to be of Lebanese, Syrian, or Cypriot extraction. The majority of Christians of Cypriot and Palestinian background are often Eastern Orthodox. Estimated African MENA populations in the United States: Algerian American, 8,752. Canarian American, 45,000–75,000. Djiboutian American, 300. Egyptian American, 190,078. Libyan American, 9,000. Mauritanian American, 992. Moroccan American, 82,073. Somali American, 85,700. Sudanese American, 42,249. Tunisian American, 4,735. American Indians and Alaska Natives. According to the 2010 census, there are 5.2 million people who are Native Americans or Alaska Native alone, or in combination with one or more races. They make up 1.7% of the total population. According to the Office of Management and Budget, an American Indian or Alaska Native is a person whose ancestry have origins in any of the original peoples of North, Central, or South America. 2.3 million individuals who are American Indian or Alaskan Native are multiracial. Additionally, the plurality of American Indians reside in the western United States. Collectively and historically, this race has been known by several names. As of 1995, 50% of those who fall within the OMB definition prefer the term American Indian, 37% prefer Native American, and the remainder have no preference or prefer a different term altogether. Native Americans, whose ancestry is indigenous to the Americas, originally migrated to the two continents between 10,000–45,000 years ago. These Paleo-Americans spread throughout the two continents and evolved into hundreds of distinct cultures during the pre-Columbian era. Following the first voyage of Christopher Columbus, the European colonization of the Americas began, with St. Augustine, Florida becoming the first permanent European settlement in the continental United States. For the 16th through the 19th centuries, the population of Native Americans declined declined in the following ways: epidemic diseases brought from Europe, genocide and warfare at the hands of European explorers and colonists, as well as between tribes, displacement from the lands, internal warfare, enslavement, and intermarriage. Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders as defined by the United States Census Bureau and the Office of Management and Budget. Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders are persons having origins in any of the original peoples of Hawaii, Guam, Samoa, or other Pacific Islands, previously called Asian Pacific American, along with Asian Americans beginning in 1976. This was changed in 1997. As of the 2010 United States Census, there are 1.2 million who reside in the United States, and make up 0.4% of the nation's total population, of whom 56% are multiracial, 14% of the population have at least a bachelor's degree, and 15.1% live in poverty, below the poverty threshold. As compared to the 2000 United States Census, this population grew by 40%, and 71% live in the West. Of those, over half live in either Hawaii or California, with no other states having populations greater than 100,000. The largest concentration of Native Hawaiians and other Pacific Islanders is Honolulu County in Hawaii, and Los Angeles County in the continental United States. Two or more races. The United States has a growing multiracial identity movement. Multiracial Americans numbered 7.0 million in 2008, or 2.3% of the population. By the 2010 census, the multiracial increased to 9,009,073, or 2.9% of the total population. They can be any combination of races and ethnicities. The largest population of multiracial Americans were those of white and African American descent, with a total of 1,834,212 self-identifying individuals. Barack Obama, 44th President of the United States, is biracial, with his mother being of English and Irish descent and his father being of Kenyan birth. However, Obama only self-identifies as being African American. Some other race. According to the 2010 United States Census, 6.2% or 19,107,368 Americans chose to self-identify with the some other race category, the third most popular option. Also, 36.7% or 18,503,103 Hispanic, Latino Americans chose to identify as some other race, as these Hispanic Latinos may feel the U.S. Census does not describe the European and American Indian ancestry as they understand it to be. A significant portion of the Hispanic and Latino population self-identifies as mestizo, particularly the Mexican and Central American community. Mestizo is not a racial category in the U.S. Census, but signifies someone who has both European and American Indian ancestry. National personification. A national personification is an anthropomorphism of a nation or its people. It can appear in both editorial cartoons and propaganda. Uncle Sam is a national personification of the United States and sometimes more specifically of the American government, with the first usage of the term dating from the War of 1812. He is depicted as a stern, elderly white man with white hair and a goatee beard, and dressed in clothing that recalls the design elements of the flag of the United States, for example, typically a top hat with red and white stripes and white stars on a blue band, and red and white striped trousers. Columbia is a poetic name for the Americas and the feminine personification of the United States of America, made famous by African-American poet Phyllis Wheatley during the American Revolutionary War in 1776. It has inspired the names of many persons, places, objects, institutions, and companies in the Western Hemisphere and beyond, including the District of Columbia, the seat of government of the United States. Language. English is the de facto national language. Although there is no official language at the federal level, some laws, such as U.S. naturalization requirements, standardize English. In 2007, about 226 million, or 80% of the population aged 5 years and older, spoke only English at home. Spanish, spoken by 12% of the population at home, is the second most common language and the most widely taught second language. Some Americans advocate making English the country's official language, as it is in at least 28 states. Both English and Hawaiian are official languages in Hawaii by state law. While neither has an official language, New Mexico has laws providing for the use of both English and Spanish, as Louisiana does for English and French. Other states, such as California, mandate the publication of Spanish versions of certain government documents. The latter include court forms. Several insular territories grant official recognition to the native languages, along with English. Samoan and Chamorro are recognized by American Samoa and Guam, respectively. Carolinian and Chamorro are recognized by the Northern Mariana Islands. Spanish is an official language of Puerto Rico.